Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Anika Apple Podcast. Oh, it is February of 2025. If you can believe it, we have already completed an entire month into this new year. I'm excited to be back with you to share the divine guidance for the month of February. And as you know, this is the episode each month where I give you some prophetic insight about what it is that we are walking into, what's ahead for us in this month of February. My outlook is typically around 12 to 18 months. And I just move myself out of the way so that God can deliver what it is that is important for you to hear and know so that you can be prepared for all of what is to come. Before we get started, I have a couple of things I want to announce and share with you. So, first and foremost, many of you have heard that I have been working on a book. It was completed last year, and I'm really excited that we are getting on the path to having it out in the marketplace. And so it is coming in short order. In a little while, I will drop the info in the chat for you to make sure that you are on the wait list so that you can get updates on the books, upcoming speaking engagements, all the information on the book tour as we launch that, as well as ensuring that you're connected for some different events that are going to be going on. I'm really excited that we are going to have some intimate events here in Atlanta, opportunities for people to not just hear about the book, but also to experience some of the healing work that I do. So I am excited about that, and I want to make sure that you are in the know. The other thing that I want to share before we get into the episode is that I am honored to be a keynote speaker at the Enough conference in Riverdale, California, and that's coming up on March 29th. And so that information is posted on all of my social media. Love to see you there, particularly if you are in the area. This conference is a great opportunity for you to lean into the truth of who you are and to celebrate the fact that you are truly and genuinely worthy. You are enough. And so all of the speakers will share their personal stories of triumph, their experiences, their insights to help you along your way, to remind you of who you are, and to ensure that you walk through the rest of this year standing in the fullness of your power. So with that said, I want to go ahead and get into our episode for today. I will tell you first and foremost that, typically on the Anika Apple Podcast, I love to start with a message from my heart to yours. I don't always do that from the divine guidance because it is just literally all of what God is sending through me. But today, I feel like there is something I really want to share with you in preparation for the message. I want you to be reminded that this is a time for you to not get weary. Do not get weary. I want you to hear it and let it resonate in your body because what I know to be true is there has been a lot going on. In the first month of the year, you probably have experienced a wider range of emotions than perhaps sometimes what you experience in an entire season. There has been a lot going on. And you're seeing a lot of things come to pass that we've talked about in the past. And we're experiencing already some of the grief, probably quite a bit of fear with all of the different things, the whispers of pandemic, all of the different things that we are seeing happening to our food supply. So there is certainly a lot. But I want to remind you not to get weary because here's the thing. You also have the benefit of knowing whose you are. You have the benefit of standing on the promises that are already yours. And so in this season, the temptation might be to give in to what you see happening to others, to find shortcuts, to follow the pathways of people who are sitting in places that you think you should be, yet you haven't run the path or the race in the way that God desired for you to. Don't get weary in well doing. Don't get weary as you wait for the promises to show up. Don't get weary and decide to settle for less than what is truly yours. This is that moment. If you've ever read that poem, Don't Quit, it was one of my favorites as a kid. At the end of it, it talks about how at the end of the race, they gave up when they might have captured the victor's cup. It's like they're so close to winning, but they just let go. And I want you to be reminded to not be weary. don't be weary. And how you support yourself in ensuring that you don't get weary is by making sure that you surrender, you find stillness, and you are seeking. I feel like those three words that God gave me at the end of last year are just going to continue to come up. Because if we think about it, surrendering is saying, okay, God, your plan is better than mine, so I surrender my plan to yours. The stillness is let me get quiet because all of these noises, all of the things that I keep thinking about in my head, keep believing like I somehow know better than you do, God. All of the plans that I had that I am so attached to happening in just the very way that I wanted them to be. All of the moments where you're listening to the whispers outside of yourself, whether people are saying, oh, things should be a certain way. All of those things stop when you find stillness. So when you bring yourself to your quiet place, you have the opportunity to reset and listen to what God is saying to you. However that happens to you, whether God is saying it to you through audibly or if God is speaking into your heart, however it is that you receive from God, from the divine, allow it to be so. But in order to do that and to hear clearly, you've got to have stillness. In this season, you are going to want to know how to silence the voices outside of yourself and how to quiet your own mind when it gets in its spin, right? You're going to need that because it will not be as easy to always decipher what other people are doing. If you watch the people who perhaps you've always watched in the past because they've always seemed to like they were moving in a way that was in alignment with God, you might find yourself in a situation because you don't know what other people are going through that might have them turn away. You don't know what other people might be experiencing that might take them off of the path, the best and most optimum plan that God has had for them or has laid out for them. And so you'll want that stillness so that you can ensure that what you are really hearing is really truly coming from God. And last thing is seeking. And this seeking, as I talk about it, it's always the earnest seeking when you're really looking to God to say, I want to know what it is that you desire, where you come with yourself empty so that God can fill you up instead of coming with all of your wants and needs and wishes. It doesn't mean that those things aren't valid, but put them in their place, right? In their places to go up when you're praying and asking for something, when there's something that you are going particularly petitioning God for. That's different than seeking where you're just saying, I want to be an empty vessel and I want to understand, God, what it is that you desire for me to know. How do you desire for me to move? What do you desire for me to contribute? That's where we want to be. So don't get weary. Find your surrender, your stillness, and your seeking, because that is what will hold you as you go through the season up ahead. You are so very close. So very close to the life you've dreamed of, to what you've desired, to stepping in or walking more boldly in your purpose. You are so very close. And there is no reason, nothing that is happening in this world that usurps that, because God is in control. So let's talk about our themes for the month of February. First and foremost, I love this theme, which is we are here. This is really the title of where we are for February in the divine guidance. We are here. We are here in this present moment. And it's interesting because perhaps the moment that you have been dreaming about when you were envisioning all of God's promises beginning to really come into fruition, when you were envisioning what it might look like in 2025 and what might be exciting, you were looking and hoping for different changes, maybe some things societally or politically, maybe there were some things that you were waiting for in your businesses or finances, maybe in your family, maybe there are things that you've been holding on to for a long time and you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen and it's going to be here. And we're in month 2 of 2025 and you're like, where is it, God? We are here. The most important message I will deliver to you this day is this: you are here. And just because the conditions around you don't look like what you expected, it doesn't mean you are not in the right position. So don't allow the circumstances and what is around you to convince you that somehow you're in the wrong place, because that's simply not true. We are here. This is the moment that has been written about, it has been spoken about, that you've dreamt about, that you've seen. This is the moment where things begin to change with irreversible momentum. And for many, that is such a relief. It is such a good thing. For others, it's complex because this irreversible momentum means that there are things that are going to change. If you think about who you need to be in this season, in this moment, I would tell you more than ever, leaning on a growth mindset, the possibilities mindset is going to be a critical skill for you. Because the more you are attached to things being exactly the way you expected them to be, the way they've always been, wanting them to be in a way that it fits nicely nestled in a box, that is not this season. This is a season of rapid fire change. This is a season where when you think something comes and you're like, oh, that doesn't look like, oh my gosh, there was a huge hidden blessing in there. This is a season where you might think I could never move away from doing that. And then an instant, something else happens. And now you are propelled further and faster than you could have imagined. That's the season that we're in. And so your ability to embrace what's possible in this season is really important. You can't stay fixed. You can't stay on what has been, on what has run its course. Some of you are being called into a moment where God keeps telling you you've got to refine your ministry, the way that you support others. Others of you have built things, businesses, even from the ground up, and you're like, I can't walk away from this. God keeps showing you something else to do. I want you to think for a moment about what happened in 2020. I know I talk about 2020 a lot, but that's because it was a test. And it was a pre-test, and this is the test, the season that we were walking into. And so part of what you experience then is going to be on display for what you do in these years, right? But think back to the people who were able to quickly pivot and go into building businesses and things like that, create opportunities that they never imagined that they would step into, and they made well through this. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today, and they were talking about a company that was based here in Atlanta that was making hand sanitizer during the pandemic. And so they quickly pivoted and they started to make the hand sanitizer. And interestingly enough, they weren't selling it, they were donating it. They were donating the hand sanitizer, which obviously did something from a branding standpoint for their business, right? Because here's something that everybody is desperately in need, and you're asking for a nominal donation. I think it was like $2 or something like that. But they made $25 million from the government to make the hand sanitizer. Let's talk about what proper positioning can do for you. If you're able to pivot, what kind of opportunities could be there for you? Can you imagine you're being able to quickly pivot for something that the community needs and being able to make a lot of money from it? Well, those of you who said, yes, I can imagine that, good, because that's exactly what you should be doing right now. Continuing to seek God in your space of surrender and stillness, asking, what else do you need me to do? See, God looks for the willingness from us to want to surrender what we have been holding on so tightly in our hands. Because here's the trick. When you hold on to something so tight, God's like, are you loving me or are you loving it? And this might be your job. It might be your marriage. It might be money. It might be your relationships. It might be control, particularly control and influence of what you have with others, like your kids. But whatever it is you are clinging to so tightly, God is wondering, like, is it me or is it it? What you have in your hand. And you're going to have to release those things so that you can receive what it is that God wants to give to you. In this season, God is going to move quickly, and we will see exponential harvest for those who are really clear that the only God they serve is God. And I don't mean in lip service. I mean in the condition of your heart. Because it's easy for us to say, oh, I love God. Everything that God tells me to do, I do. It's easy for us to say it, but to do it is another thing. And God is not judging with the words that come out of your mouth in the way that man does. God is looking directly in here to know what is the condition of your heart. And the indicator of what is where will be seen in the size and the exponential nature of your harvest. So whatever it is that you might be sitting with today, that you might be wrestling with, whatever things you might be holding on to, I'm just going to encourage you to surrender. I find that in my own journey, typically before I come deliver these messages, even though it's divine, before I sat down, I did not know what I would be talking about today. God literally gave me the bullet points as I sat here. And I can tell you that back in December and in November and in October of last year, I was going through what I am sharing with you right now because God was preparing me. Everything that I was clinging to in one way, shape, or form, God pulled it out of my hands in preparation for what is to come, for this day that we are in right here, right now. So we are here. We are in the moment where everything changes. This is the moment that has been written about. I like to read Isaiah 60 and Isaiah 61 over and over and over again. This is that time. It's the time where there's the fulfillment of God's word, where we can prepare ourselves to enjoy the fruits of the harvest of our labor and God's, the things that God has been nurturing in silence and in secret for us for years and decades, things that we have forgotten about that we even sowed into, because those things are about to come to fruition, as are the things that you know you are actively nurturing today. And when you stay in alignment with what God has for you, you will experience not just a blessing, but an exponential blessing, because that is God's promise. So I want you to know that we're here. We're in a really good place. And even though around you, you might be saying, ooh, my finances don't look the way that I want them to, or my relationship is not acting in the way that I want it to be, or I thought I would be further along on building this thing or writing this book or designing this or launching this business or this new product, or I thought I would be transitioning out of this role and taking on something else. I'm thinking about all the things that I've heard through my clients and my circles across the last couple of weeks. Yes, we are all sitting in a time where if we use our eyes, if we stand in our humanness, we will look around and not see the evidence of the thing. But that's why they call fear what it is. That's the acronym for fear, right? False evidence appearing real. It seems like we're not there. But you haven't been here before, so you wouldn't know the signs for this place. You wouldn't know what it looks like to be in this place because you haven't been here before. And because what God is doing for you, specifically for you, is different than the way you've seen it done for other people in the past. Eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard, neither has it entered into the mind of man. I need you to understand that this is a different moment that we are in, but we are here. Don't allow your eyes to deceive you. Don't allow your gaze to wander from God, because it's God's instruction that will lead you through. And perhaps, just maybe, the fact that it looks like it's not the place that you expected is a smokescreen, so that the other people around you who have been waiting to pounce on what God does for you miss it. The next thing to know, and that dovetails perfectly into our second theme, which is the separation has begun. So for a while now, I've been sharing with you about the tunnel and the decisions that we made in all of these pieces. And we are there now where we have seen the separation starting to happen. And this is a really important moment for us to recognize that as we begin to see differentiation, the set apartness of those who have called and have surrendered and are saying, giving God that eternal and consistent yes, we're starting to feel the disconnect. We're starting to feel the stretching. We're starting to feel distance happening in relationships. We're starting to know unequivocally that there are people who cannot go on this leg of the journey with you. Which doesn't mean that they won't show up where you are going. It doesn't mean that they don't have their own incredible journey. They just can't walk next to you on this path because of whatever it is that God is desiring to do with them and whatever it is that God is desiring to do with you. And they are not aligned. They're not perhaps on the same pace. They're not going to arrive at the same time. Perhaps there's some things that you still need to work on. There's some things they still need to work on. And that's going to take you in a couple different directions. You've got to recognize that in this season, you can't hold on to what God tells you to let go of. For many of you, you've been getting that message over and over and over again from lots of different places for a really long time now. You know why you keep hearing it over and over again? Because there's something you still haven't released. You've got to let go. Not everyone can go on this leg of the journey with you. You don't have full knowledge and awareness of what their choices have been. That's not a good or a bad thing. It just is. So allow yourself to accept that in this moment, things are going to be actively changing. You are going to feel the change. It may feel unsettling for you. You might feel like, wait a minute, I'm being pulled into a circle that's different than the one I am most familiar with, and it is on purpose. One of the things that I find that I have been sharing quite a bit with clients and with friends is this piece around our changing, ever changing circle. And a lot of us struggle with this dynamic, this feeling of like, I don't want anyone to think I've left them behind. But quite honestly, you haven't. Let's have some real talk here. You're not leaving anyone behind. You're simply doing what is the next step on your path. It's like when you went off to college, if that was your pathway of choice, or when you moved out of your hometown, whatever massive changes you've made, it wasn't about leaving someone. It was about stepping forward into an opportunity. And whether or not other people have the exact same opportunity as you is irrelevant, because really what matters is that there's a related opportunity that they feel equally excited about, that's right for the life that they desire for themselves, that's available to them. And so you can't leave someone behind when they have their own path to choose. What you can do is choose to put in the work, the effort, to say yes, to surrender, all of the different ways that life might be firming up in your specific instance right now. You can make decisions that are different than other people's decisions. Now, in no way am I saying that that negates that sometimes there's inequity. That's a whole nother podcast episode for sure. But what I am saying to you is you're not leaving people behind. If anything, your elevation gives you an opportunity to create spaces for people. It gives them inspiration for what is possible. It reminds them of God's promises. People can look to you and see the evidence of God working in your life, even in the midst of all the other things happening in the world around you. God can take your story, the transformation, the comeuppance, and use it to celebrate God's victory all around you, influencing the people who you've known even back in childhood, reminding them that, oh, there is God, and God sits high and looks low and is doing some big things in your life. So know and understand that this separation is a part of the pathway forward. And it's not for you to judge why or for you to even spend time looking. It's about you walking your path and trusting God that with the light, with the changes, the shifts that God is doing in your life, that it will be enough to inspire and encourage others who are meant to be inspired and encouraged by you. And in some cases, for some of you, you already know the circle that you're in doesn't match what it is that you have defined as your purpose for your life. And so in order for you to lean further into your purpose work, you've got to go into a different circle, which doesn't mean that you can't still connect with and help other people. And I said, let's have some real talk. So here it is. Yeah, you are set apart. You were designed for this, uniquely qualified for what it is that you do. And I know some of you watching this right now are like, I don't feel qualified for it, but yet you are. Because God fills every single gap between you and that which you desire to do, that which God has called you to do, that which is defined by your purpose. So it's not about you having it all figured out, having all the answers. Matter of fact, I want you to lean in this moment and just experience the healing coming through to you through my voice as I tell you that you are enough. You are more than enough. God has prepared you for this. God has given you everything you need. You just have to decide that you are unafraid. You just have to decide that keeping going is the choice to make. But you are set apart, and you are unique, and you are special, and you are different. And every person who decides to align themselves with that truth, they get to recognize they too are set apart and unique and different. The beautiful thing about it is there is no maximum amount of people who can step into set apartness. It just doesn't exist. God doesn't run out of these placards that say, oh, here, Anika, you're set apart. Here, person, you're set apart. Here, someone else, you're set apart. God doesn't run out of those. There's no maximum number. When a person is ready and they're ready to surrender and they're saying yes to their purpose, God does what God does. So let go. The season for feeling some kind of way about where other people are is over. You've got to let it go because the separation is now. And for some, the separation is the very catalyst that they will need to surrender, to come back to God in a way that honors the truth of who they are. For some, they will need that distance to remind themselves of their truth and what they chose for this lifetime. And for some, they've just decided to have an experience that will look different. Why would you forfeit what it is that God has for you and sacrifice the gift that God has given you for others to help them reach their fullest potential by not continuing to say yes and by worrying about God's children who, by the way, God has right where they want them? The last theme for February is this. I've been talking a bit about destruction. Actually, my next book is Destruction is Required. Healing is required, and then destruction is required. And I talked a little bit about destruction last month or in December. I think it was last month. And what you need to know about this is that we are in a time where you would likely call this destruction, but I want you to see that this is dismantling. There is a dismantling. And whatever feelings you are having attached to that, I get it. I can absolutely understand why you might look at this and say, like, this dismantling feels uncomfortable, or this dismantling is scaring me. It makes sense. Because when we see something being dismantled, when we see destruction, we tend to want to contract. But what could happen for you in this moment if you looked at the dismantling in a way that was very different? See, when something begins to be dismantled, you can choose to lament what was there, or you can begin planning for what is about to be built. There is a need for things to change. There has been a need for things to change for a really long time. And I know this is a semi-unpopular position to take, but we were not in good shape already. And things are going to have to change. The question is, will you be positioned to usher forth what God has placed on the inside of you as they change? Or will you allow the distraction to cause you so much pain and discomfort that you are immobilized and unable to step into the place that's been created for you? Because in this time, what we are called to is to lean fully into our gifts, the unique value proposition that we bring, the unique way we serve people, the divine insight that we have about industries and businesses, the economy. It's time for us to step forward boldly, knowing what we know. And I would venture to tell you that a lot of this what we know is what we know. It's not all just what you've read in books and what has been in school. It cracks me up when it does that. It's not just those things, but it actually is what is divinely gifted to you to understand this season and this time of change. What could happen if you decided that the things that are being dismantled now, the systems, like we've been talking about the banking system for a while, we know that's going. We know there's got to be a lot of change and reform and processes and systems. We know that schools need help. We know that there's a lot that has to change. So, what could it mean for you to be at the forefront of creating, crafting that change? And it might mean you have to get into rooms and you have to, move yourself through. That's what I'm seeing is like elbows, not knocking people out of the way, but taking up some space, stepping into the room, knowing that you are supposed to be there to begin to speak and articulate the plan that God has divinely given you for what this industry is supposed to look like. It's about time for you to take the seat at the table. Somebody else might have been warming that seat for you, but they're about to move. And so you need to be prepared to sit down in that seat and begin to share the plans that God has been showing you and expect favor as you do those things. We can't do that if we are trying to take a back seat, if we're trying to sit back, if we're trying to sit in places where we're having circles conversating with ourselves about how sad we are about the destruction. Instead, we have to understand and embrace the fact that destruction is a part of growth. It actually comes so that we can heal. It actually comes so that truth can be revealed. It actually comes so that what's broken can then be seen for all of what it is. It's like when something that looks fine, right? And you take a sledgehammer against it and it starts to crack and crumble. And then you see all of the pieces on the inside of it that were already broken. That's what's happening for us in the world right now. And so we have to understand that as we're seeing the dismantling happen, more and more of what was already broken that maybe we thought worked. God was just telling me yesterday, there's going to be so much more exposure coming. We're going to see so much more than we even knew and understood that was broken. We're going to see the deals and things that have been made in silence, that have been made behind shields and behind covering, and it's going to come into the forefront. And when it does, you will understand why it had to come down, why it had to be dismantled. It doesn't mean that the work that has been done to move along a healthy path, it was all for naught. It means that we now have something, an ability to see the contrast between what was built to cause pain and oppression and what was built to create the kind of meaningful, healthy change, that we will be able to see the difference between the two and know that there are pieces in that plan that are still good, but we still got to build it from scratch. You cannot build a new house on a faulty foundation. If the foundation is not good, if it is not solid, then no matter what you put on top of it, it is always going to be at risk. And we have been building on top of faulty foundations for far too long. It is time for the dismantling. It must happen. And what I love about God is if you're tapped all the way in, then you're watching the dismantling happen at the hands of people who I'm going to leave it there. You might question the assignment of people because you don't fully know it. And I get it. God don't tell us all the assignments for everybody. But you got to understand that God is still in control. And that even when it looks like God is not in control, God is still in control. God is still in control. Perhaps God has been tapping you on your shoulder, saying, pay attention so that you will step into what it is that you are called to do in this season. We have a lot of healing to do. We have a lot of healing to do. So many of you are in places of deep exhaustion. You're like, if one more thing happens, threatens my safety, my family, my way of life, my ability to provide. It's been a lot, and you're rightfully exhausted. You gotta rest. You have to rest because the path ahead is not easy. It's not simple, but we will reap if we faint not. God has already promised us the victory, so we have to keep going. And your version of keep going is standing in the fullness of your authority, who God created you to be. It's honoring your voice and your gifts, and it's doing what God has called you to do. And what I know to be true is that God does everything from a place of love. So even things that we see that look like they are couched in hate, it may be the motivation for that particular person to do that particular thing, but it does not mean that God is not using it for their glory. We have to understand the expansiveness of God. It's so much bigger than the simple way we reason and rationalize things in our humanness. I love when God says to me, come up a level. It's like, Anika, you are so deep down in the weeds. You're like, I don't understand this. And you're staring at it from such a perspective that you can't possibly see all the other pieces that are intersecting. So when God says, come up a level, I'm like, okay. And I sit back and I take a deep breath and I come up the next level and I call it the mezzanine. It's like where I'm sitting looking out the window of an airplane. And from up there, I can see so much further. I can have so much of a better understanding. My perspective is so much more broadened. And I recognize that what I was looking at, what I thought I was seeing really is just a tiny cog. And there's so many other wheels and gears attached to it. And all of that is making up and moving the thing that God is desiring, ushering it forward. Let us not get caught looking at these tiny details from ground level, but applying the discipline to go sit with God, to seek God so that we can come up a level and have a much better understanding of what's happening. And I would submit to you that even if you don't understand what all the gears are doing and how it's moving and all that stuff, by the mere fact that you go and sit with God, you will have the confidence that there is a plan bigger than what the eye can see. And that is going to be what you need to hold on through the challenges that are to come. God wants you to know that their promises are true. And I'm seeing right now that some of you have lists. You've been keeping your list, and good for you, because you should keep a list of what God says to you and what God says about you and what God says is going to happen. And God says, don't throw the list out yet, because in the season, I will do these things. So don't throw the list away, because what's happening right now, you can't see. There are things I was talking to God the other day, and I said, okay, there's a couple of things on my list, like, yeah, I thought that was supposed to happen last year. And as quickly as I said it, I got the gentle nudge and reminder of some things that I was supposed to do too. We want to hold God to this standard of delivering everything that we desired in the time that we wanted without our surrender and commitment to do the things that God asked of us. There was a prophetic word that was released for me a few months ago. Someone that I don't know well, just that I follow on social media, and he said some things to me that mirrored what God had been saying to me earlier that day. And one of the things that he said to me, he talked about my book, and he was very specific to mention the month that the book was supposed to originally have been completed in the year before. And I was surprised and I chuckled, like, and being able to like identify God, identifying a book for the prophet, get it, of course. But the month was like, oh my gosh. And when he said the month, it wasn't just the fact that the month was true. It was that I could not deny that God had asked me to pace myself to finish it by that month. And I didn't. And I can't tell you why. Oh, I can. I was afraid. I was afraid. I was sitting in this is not going to be enough. And what if people don't really understand and they don't really understand my gift? They don't know that I speak for God, that I am a prophet. They don't understand that I am God's prophet. They don't understand that I am God's heart on earth. They don't understand that I'm called to advise and help people center themselves in their spirituality so they can show up in the way that they were blessed to in this world, so that they can create change in their organizations and lead people out of darkness. Like, they don't really know who I am. And so there's no way that my writing this in this time is going to be enough. And so I talked myself out of it. So, how can I hold God to a timeline that I did not commit to finishing myself? You see, we delay the work that God desires for us. The divine appointments, think about all of the people too who were supposed to be a part of the path who are in holding patterns, right? I think of my editor in this very moment because I met her about almost a year, half a year before I hired her, almost a year before I hired her to be the editor of my book. And had it been finished in the time that God had called me to, when I met her the first time, we could have started working on editing the book. And this particular prophet who spoke to me and talked about the book, who definitely did not know that I had a book because I had never shared any of that on anywhere on social, and he's not someone that follows me or knows me, but he said it was supposed to, there was something else that was supposed to happen with the book. There was a next level that was supposed to happen with the book, something I had not ever spoken aloud to anyone. And there are things that we are holding on to on our list right now that we feel sore about. We feel disappointed about, maybe even frustrated, maybe at sometimes angry about because they didn't happen in the way that we wanted them to. But you have a role to play in the things coming to fruition. So you cannot hold God to a timeline, to a commitment, to fulfilling a promise when you haven't done the pieces that God has asked of you. And so what God was showing me a few moments ago is this list, like you're clinging to these lists, but you've got to go back to the other lists. Where's your list of what you said too? This is a gentle nudge. It's a loving reproach. It's not a pointed judgment. It's a reminder. And God is saying, I want to give you the things, the desires of your heart. No good thing will I withhold from you. I want to give it to you. But I need you to do these things. And some of you are like, but these things are so menial. Is it really that big a deal, God? And God is like, yes. Because even if I had finished the book in September, it wouldn't have been done. I didn't know all of what I learned last year that made its way into the book. There was a season of life that was coming, though, that I needed to be present for. God's ask was not simply about my being ready to go put the book out in the world, all the fears that I was holding, right? Like it's not ready, all of that stuff. But God wanted me to be able to be present for what was about to happen, for the changes that were about to occur in my life, in my family's life. And so in that, had I done that, I would have had a more easeful time. And I would have been able to actively capture the things that were happening in the moments rather than capturing them while writing, which is what actually happened. It's a loving reproach, an invitation for you to do what it is that God has asked you to do, to clean up your list. Because God's work with me from September of 23 till now is all about me becoming who it is that I am. And what I was afraid of that stymied the completion of the work back then was relieved as God continued to do the work in me through the end of 23 and all throughout the year of 2024, so that I could be here now, ready to launch, ready to share, ready to grow. The promises of God are real and they are true. And I take you back to what I said in the beginning of this episode. We are here. So don't allow yourself to be distracted or to think that the things that God has said are not going to happen. Even if God says you are to experience favor in a very industry that looks like it's falling apart, you are not to begin thinking that somehow it can't come to pass. Let God handle the details. I tell people all the time, God has the how and God gets the when. You get to co-create the what. So stay in your lane and let God handle theirs. As things are shifting and moving, you have no idea of the plans that God has. I'm thinking Jeremiah 29 right now. You have no idea the way that God wants to set you apart and to elevate you. But you will stand in the way if you hold so tightly to what has already been. It's time for you to grow and it's time for you to advance. It's time for you to stand boldly on faith and let go of the things that are holding you back. It's time for you to address your fears and to walk more boldly into who you know that you are. It's time for you to begin to proclaim who you are, to tell the truth about what you are here to do. It's time for you to allow people to see you, to seeing your wings expand, to see you walk in the revelry of who God has created you to be. It's time. And quite frankly, who cares? Who doesn't understand? There is one person who gets the memo for who you are in this lifetime, and that is you. There are people along your path that God might share with you pieces of who you are. They might give some insight. They might even give some moments where they get to see a little bit of what you're called to do. But you are the one that gets the real plan. And I believe God does that on purpose because you have to say yes to this fullest, highest version of yourself in order for other people to even understand it or believe it. So don't worry about what other people might think in this season. You just got to do your work to stand boldly before God as who God has called you to be. Let God do the work of revealing and reintroducing you when it is your time. That's all the time that I have for the podcast today. Thank you for joining for the Divine Guidance for February of 2025. Of course, the episode will be uploaded to YouTube and you'll be able to listen to the replay if you missed any parts of it today. Please make sure if you haven't subscribed that you do that now so you don't miss these episodes. This is a place that you can come back to for truth, for what is happening in the world, and also to experience some of the beauty of God's healing as it flows through. I want to invite you right now to stay in the know around the book updates and speaking engagements and all of the different things, podcast episodes, all of the different things that are happening. So there's a link here that I have put in the chat. Go ahead to the bit.ly link and make sure that you sign up to be an insider so that you have all of the information about the upcoming events. Atlanta, I'm really excited that in a few days, we're going to be able to share with you some upcoming speaking engagements. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to host some things in Atlanta. And, we will be making our tour around some other places coming up this spring. So I'm really excited to share those as we get into that as well. Lastly, I just want to remind you that all the information about how to work with me is on my website at anikaapple.com. And one of the more recent things that I have added to my arsenal of programs is the Soul to Crown, Crown to Soul coaching sessions. These are intuitive guidance sessions where I allow God to come through me to support you in the path to your purpose. And so whether they are questions about things related to the way that you live your life, how you can begin to really deepen your trust and your knowing in your relationship with God, or if it is about how you lead your business forward in a way that you are in true alignment with self and working through the purpose that God has put inside of you, this is your place. So sign up for the Soul to Crown, Crown to Soul Divine Guidance sessions today, and you can do that right on AnikaApple.com. As always, I wish you peace and blessings, and I'll see you next week on the Anika Apple Podcast.